Okay, and welcome back. We are beginning a new year, and with it a new set of challenges. And I wanted to talk tonight to Reverend Ted Pike, who has led the fight for over 20 years to try to preserve and protect what's left of our Constitution, which is being called by more and more of the Zionist activists as an old document that is no longer relevant and is, quote, impossible to understand. That was one recent quote I just posted the other day. These people have an agenda that they're not hiding. They're putting it right out there, throwing it right at us, and I don't hear anybody standing up and really doing anything about it. Except us here. And Ted Pike has been, again, laying his life on the line, quite literally, to protect our Constitution, our way of life, and our First Amendment. Ted, are you there?
Well, I really believe that the Zionist agenda has suffered some major setbacks, not only in the past 2 years with the blitz on Gaza, but with the abortive raid, the violent terrorist raid on the Free Gaza flotilla last spring. But also, there's an increasing prevalence of a real blatant and outright racism in Israel that is coming to the attention of the world. And I have been warning for the past nearly 30 years, in fact, that Talmudic Judaism in general and Zionism, Israeli Zionism, is essentially a racist theology and political doctrine of Jewish supremacism. And of course, this has been poo-pooed by many evangelicals and skeptics who say that sounds like anti-Semitism to them. But what's happening really today in Israel is that the radical rabbis, dozens of them, perhaps hundreds now, are joining together to quote the Talmud, to affirm the Talmud, especially concerning its vitriolic, racistic statements and recommendations.
Now this, of course, is coalescing to a large degree around Avigdor Lieberman and his overtly racist statements and his stance and his genocidal beliefs. There's no doubt about it. Israel seemingly is swinging hard in his direction, a great deal of it. Now, there's some wonderful Israelis who are fighting very hard for peace and justice in the area. They're sickened by what their country has done in their name, just like many Americans are sickened by the wars being fought by this government in their name. But it's not enough over there. It's not enough.
Well, in order for it to get better, I believe it is vitally necessary that the world rise up in righteous indignation against Israel. I'm not talking about vulgar anti-Semitism. I'm not talking about any kind of bigotry or, of course, not violence or anything like that. But it's necessary to turn up the temperature and realize that what has happened there, especially over the last century, is not a divinely endorsed return of God's chosen people fulfilling hundreds of Old Testament prophetic prophecies. It's really a very sectarian and a ruthlessly ambitious Zionist, Khazar, Pharisaical, Bolshevik, Marxist. There's a lot of things in the hopper here that make modern Zionism very aggressively threatening to the peace of the whole world, and of course especially the Middle East. And I have been, along with a number of other critics of Israel and of Talmudic Judaism, I have been speaking as kind of a voice in the wilderness, especially during the 1990s, trying to awaken not only the conservative right, but also the religious right, that this is a continuation of a sinister agenda begun by the ancient Pharisees 2,000 years ago. And this has fallen largely on deaf ears, but increasingly the abuses of Israel in Gaza, the terrorist attack on the flotilla, and now, to cap it off, these rabbis, something like 50 rabbis came out several weeks ago with a bold declaration that racism originates in the Torah and that the Jews in Palestine have not only no duty, they are commanded by halakha or binding Jewish law not to rent or to sell to Arabs anymore in the state of Israel. And what's happening is that there's an increasing even homicidal, not only racist, but homicidal zeal coming out of these ultra-Orthodox and Orthodox rabbis. We're talking about hundreds of them throughout Israel, presiding over various jurisdictions and cities in Israel, who are actually calling for the killing of the Palestinians, even the children. For example, there was a book published called The King's Torah last year, which has been very widely read and approved of by dozens of top Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox rabbis in Israel, which does call for the killing of the Palestinians, even of Palestinian children, presuming that they will only become terrorists in the future. Might as well kill them right now. And in fact, the head of the Shah's party in Knesset, Obadiah Yosef, has made very, very blatant statements in the last 6 weeks or so that Gentiles literally exist to serve Jews, that they are literally beasts of burden. Outrageous statements. And the corker, of course, was several weeks ago when Rabbi Shmuel Eliyahu, who is one of the very most important rabbis in Israel, the rabbi of Safed, he came out with a halakhic dictum that any Jew now who sells or rent to an Arabs to Arabs may be the subject of actual violence, not only just persecution, but violence by the people of Israel against them as a heretic, as a violation of the Torah of Moses.
Well, there you go. We're almost. It's like we're going back in time in a way, Ted.
Yes.
Are we not?
Well, it's certainly ADL and Southern Poverty Law Center and so on can no longer point to the American South as a former bastion of segregationism and racism and Jim Crow persecution of blacks when you have basically Selma, Alabama going on in Israel right now, blatant discrimination against the Arabs. And this is not, we're not talking about isolated outcroppings of rabbinic hypocrisy and bigotry right now, because the free-speaking newspaper of Israel, Haaretz, literally every week they have numerous articles dramatizing, pointing out that in every aspect of Israel's relationships to the Arab, whether it's the settlers, whether it's the government, whether it's the army, whether it's planning commissions, whether it's housing authorities, and so on, the Arabs are being ruthlessly discriminated against, denying them the most fundamental rights and privileges and necessary infrastructure to build any kind of a culture and a self-respecting way of life in Palestine. We're talking about a major online Jewish newspaper, which is confirming that the Netanyahu Lieberman government, while it may ostensibly cluck its tongue over misbehavior of the settlers, brutality.
That's all BS. It's window dressing. You know it.
Yeah, it is. It is. The truth of the matter is, what's happening here is, you see, back in 1948, as early as the early 1940s, in fact, the government of Israel, the ostensible government of Israel under Ben-Gurion, officially disapproved of the Stern Gang, the Irgun terrorists, and so on. But history-recorded documents, subsequent documents released later by the British and by the Israelis themselves, revealed that Ben-Gurion and the top Zionist leadership were in close communication with Shamir, with Dagon, and so on, deeply involved in all the terrorist atrocities, even authorizing the Deir Yassin massacre in the spring of 1948. And so what we have here is the same thing going on, in which I believe the Netanyahu government is indulging the ultra-Orthodox element, a fanatical, violent, Talmudic, racist element in Israel, with the idea that they will be the new terrorists, the new shock troops, a new generation of fanatical Talmudists who are armed with guns and explosives and so on, who will go down and root out the Arab population literally finishing what was uncompleted in 1948.
Well, that's the plan. There's no question about it. They want these people dispersed and or liquidated, or both. And they're pushing that way quite clearly.
There's a far-reaching preparation to get the minds of the young people used to the idea that they are here to revenge and make right tremendous wrongs. In the case of Israel, the Goyim, the Christians, the so on, who have persecuted their people for millennia. And in Judaism, in the Israeli ultra-Orthodox branch of Judaism, the idea is inculcated, as I say, from their earliest education, that the Goyim are inherently hateful, homicidal, out to get the Jews, and a cardinal tenet of Judaism, coming from the Talmud, is that the Jew has the duty, if he knows that a Goyim is out to kill him, the duty of the Jew is to kill him first.
Sure. Ted, the Southern Poverty Law Center was one of the most ridiculous cover names in history. Continues to make news, and whenever they speak, the news media obediently carries their, well, whatever it is, a press release, a news release, an interview, it doesn't matter. Who are these people?
They're kind of an echo of most everything ADL goes after. I think one of the worst, the most egregious attacks of the SPLC occurred only several weeks ago, when 18 Christian conservative organizations were described as hate groups. And this attack included Family Research Council, American Family Association, the old standard, the so-called watchdog groups of the religious right. And of course, there was some protest. Certainly, probably the most interesting was that of Tony Perkins, head of the Family Research Council, who demanded an apology from SPLC. And of course, that's really quite pathetic. What Perkins should do is to declare once and for all that SPLC is a 100% Jewish supremacist organization, which is dedicated, like the ADL, to promote homosexuality, to promote reverse discrimination against Christian conservative Americans, and certainly to promote hate laws and an end of free speech in America. And of course, I unceasingly nag and browbeat the religious right for their incredible silence on this issue. In fact, I can only tally 3 instances in the last century when the Christian conservative right in any form has made any mention of the Anti-Defamation League.
All right, well, let me ask you a quick question. Does that mean or suggest that the Christian right has been penetrated, bribed, blackmailed, bought off somehow? Back in a minute with Ted Pike.